Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 of This is Womanhood. Before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody for all the feedback that I've had since I've put the podcast live last week. So many amazing positive messages and people getting in touch, and I really appreciate it. Keep all of that coming. Today's episode, I'm speaking to an amazing woman called Sarah Rose Bright, who is a sex, pleasure and intimacy coach. So I'll let you listen to her explain what exactly that is, and we talk about her journey into getting there. We talk about some of the common themes that come up with the clients that she works with, which I'm sure lots of people listening to this podcast will be able to relate to because it's such a big topic. So I'm not going to say too much because we delve into all of this in the podcast. So I think it's best to just let Sarah do most of the talking here. So I hope that you enjoy, and I will make sure to put Sarah's details below so that you can get in touch with her, work with her, go to her workshops and all of that, because there's so much beneficial information in what she is sharing. So enjoy, guys. Okay, welcome Sarah. Welcome to This is Womanhood. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you.
I've been so excited for this interview because, as I was saying to you offline, I think it's every time I've mentioned it to anybody about what you do and saying that I was interviewing you, it's been the big topic that everyone's gone, right, I need to listen to that podcast because it's such a big topic and it's just seen as such a taboo topic. Like sexuality is seen as something that nobody wants to talk about. So I'm very excited to talk about it. Yeah. So I thought we'd just start by, if you just give people an idea of like what it is that you do. I know on your website you describe yourself as sex, pleasure and intimacy coach, teacher, educator and sexologist. So if you just give people an idea of what those things are and a little bit, if it's okay, about your background and your journey to get into practicing these things.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you
for creating space to talk about this, because it is just so important to have conversations around this area of our lives for all sorts of different reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
So I call myself a sex, pleasure and intimacy coach, and I very purposely put the term pleasure in there because often we don't have a culture where we find it easier to have pleasure. You know, so many people, when they have pleasure, whether it's sexual pleasure or whether it's going out with a friend for lunch, can feel guilt and all sorts and can't relax and switch off. So a lot of what I do is not just helping people with sexual challenges or challenges around intimacy, but also just experiencing pleasure. So the three really go hand in hand together. So I help people overcome sexual problems, but also help people to discover what's possible. And I've just got my new strapline, which is like live your potential. Because when people are blocked in this area of their lives, it often impacts every area of their life. You know, so if you've got a sexual problem, that can really affect your confidence, all sorts of things. And what I find is that it's like a gateway. When people address this, the ripple effect can happen in so many different areas of their lives.
Right,
Their creativity comes online, like we were just talking about. They have amazing relationships. I had a woman recently who, because of the work we did, her confidence went up and she went for a job she never thought she'd get, but it was amazing just to even apply for the job. And she got the job and doubled her income.
Wow, gosh, that's
you know,
amazing.
so it really affects everything. And I work very much within a sort of coaching modality. So you know, people say to me, a bit like someone who's hired me recently said, it's a bit like having a personal trainer for this area of their lives. They actually haven't got any problems, but they just know there's more to learn. And they want some support to do that because they're just really busy professionals. And they're curious as what's out there.
So do you work one-on-one with all these clients?
Yeah, so I work one-on-one. I do a lot of my classes online as well as in person, mainly online, and then I run a whole host of different workshops, retreats, online courses for people, some on my own, some collaborating with other amazing friends and colleagues. And education is in the title because it's a massive big part of what I do. You know, we really are taught such a limited slice of what's possible for our bodies and pleasure. And then sexologist is somebody who study sex, and you know, what better subject to devote your life to studying.
Amazing. So what was your journey to finding this? Has it been something that you've always been interested in, or did it kind of just knock on your door one day?
Well, I laugh because people often say, well, you must be really good at sex to have got into this job.
Right.
And it's exactly the opposite.
Okay, right.
So I got to 29 and I was really terrified of sex. Sex had not been a happy part of my life. I'd had quite an emotionally abusive relationship in my teenage years, which had left me with zero body confidence. I thought my genitals were deformed. I had a very little self-esteem, and I took that into my adult relationships. And I'd started doing personal development work and just really noticed that everything was talked about, but sex was never mentioned, and all other aspects of our lives were talked about. And I knew I had to do something about it because I was reading Cosmopolitan, and I was looking at an advert for labiaplasty where you have your labia removed.
Wow.
And I thought maybe that's the answer, but somehow that jolted me to sort of go, no, something's got to change here. I knew I didn't want to go and see a doctor because I didn't have any medical problems, and I knew a therapist just felt a bit heavy for me. I didn't want to. I didn't feel like I wanted to sit and talk about my past, but I knew I had to address it. And really, there was nowhere else to go, and so I was in Waterstones in Liverpool, looking in the bookshelves, and I found a book on Tantra. And then from that book, started browsing online, and I found there was a women's sexuality workshop in Lancashire, of all places. Considering this was 15 years ago, there's not much around.
Yeah.
Booked myself on that, and it was just mind-blowing and life-changing.
Wow.
And that was for my 30th birthday. And it was terrifying, but also just incredible. In the first weekend, I really thought my genitals were deformed, and they had us looking at each other's genitals. And it was just like the most amazing experience, because it wasn't like in a titillating way. It was just like, let's just be real as women. Let's look at our bodies.
So it's just all women.
Yeah. And look at our bodies. And it was all about body image and body dysmorphia and all of that. And I left there going, oh my God, I'm actually okay.
Wow.
And the relief was just incredible. And seeing the transformation of other women in the room just got me on a journey of I did as many of the workshops as I could, and then I started assisting, and then people started asking me for advice, and then I went and did training, and it's just gone from there.
Wow.
So that was 15 years ago, and I've had a full-time practice now for 10 years. So
wow, that's amazing. And so did you find in that first workshop that there was lots of women who were experiencing the same feelings as you? Was everyone kind of nervous, or was it people that had been into it for ages? So did you feel fearful of that as well?
Course, because you've got no one to talk to when you've got sexual problems often, and you often can't even talk to your best friends and your family, your partners even. And it wasn't necessarily that the women had the same problems, but it was that I wasn't the only one with problems.
Yeah.
And actually hearing people share the truth of how it was for them and the challenges they were having, and realising I wasn't alone. Actually, one of the most powerful parts that weekend was in hearing other people's stories, you know, and going, oh my gosh, there's so many people out there. And it just got really curious as to how come sex is everywhere on one level, you know, in the media and advertising and stuff. Yeah, actually, so many people seem to be really struggling with it. And if this is a group of people that are struggling with it, how many other people are out there? You know?
Yeah. And it's such a taboo subject, like you say. It's such a big topic in people's lives, but nobody does talk about it.
Yeah.
What's your opinion, and why do you think that is?
I think there's so many levels to it, but I mean, some of the key ones are we don't talk about it in our homes when we're brought up. So it's like the message we get is we just don't talk about this, you know? And often what the education that we do get is often fear-based. You know, the little bit of education is how not to get pregnant, how not to get an STI. And also, I was listening to this on another podcast the other day, and it really struck home that as teenage boys will get taught a bit about masturbation maybe, and at the same time girls are learning about bleeding and periods, which is often in a very negative way of, you know, not in a, you know, like in some of the healthier ways, like the rites of passage and things that are coming through now. So we don't talk about it there. We don't talk about it at school. When we do talk about it, it's often very uncomfortable or fear-based. So just that alone is huge. What messages? It's the silence that gives us the message in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't have a language for it. You know, when I got into this work, you know, I couldn't say the word vagina without getting bright red and, you know, cringing because it was just so foreign to me and uncomfortable. And even if you look at, say, sex on the movies or sex in porn, nobody talks in that. You know, they make lots of noise, but nobody communicates. Oh, this is okay, or this isn't, because it doesn't make for great viewing. Probably they want it all the showing, performance. But I think again, it leaves a sort of subconscious message that this isn't something to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and then obviously you've got. And if there are conversations about it among children and teenagers and different stuff, it's often in a more of a bravado or Mickey-taking way than a healthy, like, I'm having this problem, or how is it for you to feel that in your body, you know?
Yeah.
Because if we just went to teenagers and young kids, you know, you're going to have this amazing surge of hormones and you're going to feel all this energy and all this excitement and encourage that aspect of it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the shame, you know, that is, and also, you know, there is so much shame, so many. You know, obviously, unfortunately, there's huge amounts of people who've experienced their first sexual experiences as being traumatic. And so that leaves a massive imprint in someone's being. You know, I think we underestimate the impact that can have on somebody's life. And then there's traumas like rape, sexual abuse. And then there's also sort of smaller traumas of maybe a name somebody's called you and taken them, you know, or the unwanted glance you've had from a family member or somebody on the street because you're just, you know, maybe just finding your sexuality as a young girl, and all these things, how they just create, oh, I shouldn't be a sexual being then, or, you know, and there's so many messages we get around what it is to be a good girl sexually and what it is what bad girls do, you know. Look at, but boys are called studs if they have lots of sex, and men and women are called sluts and whores. So we just have so many things that just make it a subject that's so uncomfortable. We don't have a language for that. It's easier, you know, not to share it.
Yeah. And so do you think a lot of those problems, a lot of that, those problems that you talk about from teenage perspective come from the fact that we don't talk about it? So if we talked about it with our children, it was just an open thing, then those things wouldn't even happen during your teenage years because it would just be an accepted thing.
100% would make it so much easier, because so many parents that I speak to are scared of talking to their children about it because they don't know how to handle it. And also, if they are uncomfortable sexually, which a lot of adults are for different reasons, then that's going to come across in the conversation. And I say to people, it's like, you don't need to know everything. It's more just to be open to have that conversation and just it to be normal and natural. And so I think as parents, there's great things like the FPA run a speakeasy course sometimes at schools where you can go in as a parent and you can learn how to find language and what to say and what's age appropriate for your children. And so I think it's really wise to read up and get support so that you can you know, because I totally believe if we had good sex education and good conversations in our homes, I wouldn't see the majority of my clients, you know. It affects us that much. And also there's a fear that if I say I've got a sexual problem, how will that make me look? You know, am I the only one? We all, you know, there's so much around trying to be sexually perfect and looking like we do know and all of this that people have got so, you know, so scared of saying, actually, I don't know. Or,
and do you think that comes from, like you were saying earlier about the movies and porn and things like that? Like, what impact do you think that those types of things has had on the sexual lives of the people who you see, or just people in general?
Huge. I mean, because if you look at sex in the movies, usually any sex scene is the couple are clothed to come together. Within seconds, the clothes are ripped off. If it's a heterosexual couple, there's penetration within seconds, which just gets harder and faster, which is just, you know, too much for so many women. It really is. But we when we see that, we think that's the norm. We don't realise how much missed out of that picture. And then obviously in sex and in porn, it's a very, I mean, with porn, it's like mass market porn to me is to sex, like, you know, McDonald's is and junk food is to food. It's just, you know, not, it's lots of use of it isn't healthy, you know?
Absolutely.
And so, and porn presents a very male trajectory of how sex is. So it gets harder, faster, hotter, and all these things, which again is one way of having sex, and there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, you know, people sometimes want to rip each other's clothes off and just go for it, but that's not the only way. There's many other options, you know, and some people, there's a phrase at the moment knocking around called the feminization of sex. And how do we have sex from a more embodied place of really listening deeply to our bodies and what feels true, and the sort of more tantric ideas of things like the slow sex movement,
Right.
And so there's many different flavours and textures of how we can experience our bodies and our pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But we just learn, and and even when we learn to masturbate, we often do that quickly and quietly because we don't want to get caught.
Right.
So we learn sex in a very performance-based way from all of the messages that we hear around us. And so what I do with my clients, a core of what I do is something called the pleasure model. So it's how do we get out that goal-focused sexuality where it's tension-based and it's fast and hard into a different quality, which is much more about pleasure and bringing all the qualities of mindfulness to our sexual experience and slowing down and all of those sort of things, authenticity. And,
Mm-hmm. So from the clients that you work with, would you say it's kind of like 50-50 male, female, or do you think it's kind of across the board, or do you think it's more female or more male? Or
for me, I'd say at the moment it varies.
Yeah.
And so I would say it's probably about 25% men, maybe about, and then probably the rest split between women and couples.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
So you work with men, women and couples.
Yeah.
And then what are kind of some of the themes that come up a lot for you, do you find, within your sessions? So a lot of the issues that people are experiencing.
Yeah, so people often come to me because they've hit a block. So it's not necessarily they've got a sexual problem. It might be they want to reestablish their sex life after children or childbirth. It might be that they haven't had sex for a while and they've got to this point where they've got to do something about it, say as a couple. Women often come to me around not feeling sexual desire. That's a really common one. Things like just lack of sexual confidence. Am I doing it right is a question I get asked a lot. And another one is, a lot with women is not knowing what they want. It's like, how do I communicate it and how do I discover what I want? But often people will come to me when if they're single, they'll come to me after a relationship split up and maybe the sex life has been part of why they split up. And it's a real opportunity to just take stock and go, what happened there? And what do I want to do going forward? And then also there's all the sort of standard common sexual problems that people have, like for men having problems with erections or ejaculating quicker than they'd like to. For women, things like not orgasming, conditions, things like pelvic pain and different things are really common conditions, unfortunately, that affect people's sex lives. Body image, a whole host of things, but rarely someone will come to me with one thing and it usually unlocks quite a few things. It's rarely one thing. Yeah.
So is it, obviously it's kind of like the therapy, so is it lots of talking as well and going down those routes, like emotionally, like where is this problem or this block arisen from?
Yeah, so I work as a coach rather than the therapist. Although there's a lot of overlap between good therapy and good coaching, there's also some distinguishing things. So for me, with the coaching, it's very much about here we are now, where do we want to get to? And so I say there's three elements to what I do. There's the coaching, there's education, and then there's practice. So the coaching part is talking. It might be looking at beliefs. So many people have myths about how sex should be. Like just for example, for a man that he should always have an erection, or for a woman, or that we should just know what to do when it comes to sex. Like we should, if we don't just know, then there's something up with us. All these different myths. So there's unpicking a lot of those. And so we look at the past sometimes, but it's very much focused on the now. So education is a massive piece, because people just simply are not taught anything, about their bodies. I mean, if I gave someone the keys to the car and didn't give them any driving lessons and they expect them to just get on with it, they'd have problems. They might even get to start the car, let alone drive anywhere. Yet nobody tells us how these bodies work in terms of how our pleasure, our arousal works and all these different things. So there's the education piece, and that can be so healing in and of itself, because people are like, oh my God, no wonder I've been struggling if I didn't know that, And then the other part of it is practice. So if you're going to learn anything, a musical instrument, you want to learn dance or tango, you practice. And it's the same when it comes to this. And so creating time for practice, because we don't have a culture of practice. If a band plays at the Liverpool Echo Arena, they've put hours in to do that show, yet we're expected to turn up in the bedroom and just do the show without any practice.
Yeah.
So creating practice time, whether that's individually, whether that's with partner, sometimes I do that with clients in the session, because in those practices, that's where everything comes alive. So, for example, a practice that I do with people is something called the 3-minute game, which comes from an amazing woman called Betty Martin. So for many people, saying what they want and knowing what they want is a massive thing. And we could sit around and talk about it, and we could sit around and examine the past, which can be really helpful. But actually having practices that help them really explore in the here and now is so powerful. So we might just we do this little game where we might take it in turns to ask for the touch that we'd like on our hands. Simply that. And that alone can be profoundly life-changing for people. They have these deep realizations. And I had a couple on Skype that I was doing this game with, so I facilitated the couple doing the game, and the woman just went, I've never asked for what I wanted in my life, and just broke down in tears.
Wow.
Yeah,
so that's amazing.
So those 3 elements of the coaching, practices and education are so important. And then that person has an experience of asking for what they want. And in that conversation and tuning into their body and getting out of how they should be in sexual interactions or intimate interactions can be so profoundly life-changing.
And then you kind of talked a little bit about it then, but so in terms of other parts of your life, have you found that has carried over? So could you give us some examples about how people have then used what they've learned through that into kind of release the blockages in other areas of their life?
So a client recently that I've just finished work with, he realised that he wasn't very, through our work, not only was he not initiating sex with his wife very much because he had all sorts of nerves and was sort of suppressing his sexual impulses, he wasn't bringing his voice into the workplace. And as he started to find his confidence in the bedroom again and with his wife, and look at what was blocking him and address that, he started to speak up more in meetings at work because he just felt his opinion wasn't valued, and found that actually people were really valuing what he was saying. And so, and I see that sort of thing happen all the time. There's a phrase, how we are in anything is how we are in everything.
Right, wow, like
that. and so even when people will say to me, I'm really confident the rest of my life, it's just not in the bedroom, but actually I often find that's not fully true. So they may be more confident, but they start to realise there's still little ways that they hold themselves back or don't fully say something, and this work gives them the power empowers them to find that voice for themselves often.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's amazing. So you teach people to connect to the pleasure, obviously within the bedroom, but in all parts of life. So it is just welcoming that pleasure. So what kind of ways do you find that people bring that pleasure in?
So I guess it's like we do a little pleasure audit, of their lives. Do they actually allow themselves to have pleasure? Because so often, I was brought up with the real Protestant work ethic of pleasure happens, when you have holidays or when you retire, like, and so if somebody, so I will ask people how, when do they relax? How do they relax? What sort of things do you do that give you pleasure? And actually that question, sometimes people don't have an answer for, So if they don't, it's like it's so important that we work on pleasure in all aspects of their lives, because how are they ever going to switch off and enjoy it in the bedroom? And then so I ask them, like, what would they like to do that they're not doing? So it may be that they love to have baths, or it may be that they like to read, or they like to be outdoors. And, it can simply be giving yourself permission to just stand in the sun for 5 minutes or enjoy the beautiful flowers that are coming out rather than rushing, because we're just so busy. But I feel like, a lot of people that come to see me are quite depleted and exhausted and burnt out. And so for me, pleasure is like food for our souls. I don't know if you've read there's this research called the telomeres. Telomeres are these little caps that go on the chromosomes of our DNA. So when we're in the stress hormone cycle, which so many people are in day in, day out, those caps shrink, and so do our DNA strands, which affects our longevity and our vitality. But when we do pleasurable things, it expands these things, these little caps. So it's linked to just our overall health, well-being, and our vitality, our energy. So I really encourage people to connect with that actually pleasure's good, because often people feel that pleasure doesn't have a purpose, don't have time for pleasure, but actually it's going to give you more energy and help you feel better, that's going to, you can give, especially with women, they're often last on the list, and it's like, how do you give from a place of an overflowing cup rather than a burnt out one? And so once they connect to the purpose and see that it's got a benefit for the hormones and everything, that helps people to engage more in it. And it's just finding simply those little things, permission to go and have lunch with your mates, or go for a massage, or or have a massage with your partner, or just really simple things.
I think that's such a big thing for a lot of, well, I say women, probably men as well, but from a women's perspective, that especially when you've got children, it's like, I know I've found that in my own life, like I have to be doing something productive. I have to be busy. I have to be, if I've got a spare minute, I've got to be cleaning like the dishes, or I've got to be doing a bit of work, or I've got to be fitting everything in, so everything else comes before doing stuff for yourself. And so I've really, for me recently, I'm trying to find the time to do those things for myself, because like you say, you can't pour from an empty cup, so you need to be able to nourish yourself first, which I think, and like you say, giving themselves permission, that's such a big word. Giving yourself permission to do those things, to experience pleasure and to enjoy your own body. I think there's so much disconnect between people and their own bodies and what is good for them, because that's another thing. It's like, I think that obviously, as you've just said, it's like finding, you want to voice to people what feels good, but how do you find out what feels good? How do you know what feels good? So do you feel like this like everybody needs this education? Because like you say, if you've never been taught how to drive a car, you wouldn't know how to drive a car. So do you feel like this should be something that is so like as readily available as a yoga class, to teach people about how to enjoy their bodies and how to find what works for them?
Some of me and my colleagues have said, look at how yoga's gone from being not visible at all, being odd classes, to like, all studios all over the place. And I'd love this to be the same. Not everybody needs it. Some people are really comfortable with this area of their lives, and I say to people, it's like, some people are just naturally born gifted at painting or gardening or cooking, and some people are just really comfortable and natural with sex, and it might be due to their upbringing, it could be all sorts of reasons. But one of my teachers says, great lovers are made, not born, and I think so many people could benefit from this, because we're at a unique time in history where the fact that we can actually entertain the idea of having a long-term sex life into our old years is very new. We're living longer than would have been 100 years ago, and sex and marriage were about different things, and so our sex and sexuality is something that's fluid and ever-changing. It's not fixed. So I think to learn about it at different phases, like I've just started getting into perimenopause, so that's raising a whole new set of questions for me and my body and what's happening. So it would be amazing to have classes, everywhere, and definitely so much potential there.
And I was listening to a podcast the other day around sexuality, and it was talking about how a few thousand years ago there was no repression of sexuality. So how have you found that in your own research and your own studies of how it's changed kind of over such a long period of time?
There's different cultures where there's where it's over history where it's been a lot freer and being more just seen as a natural part of life. And I'm not a big historian in that way, so but certainly know that they're aware. And also just like there's a beautiful book called Pussy by Mama Gina.
I love that book. That's like
brilliant.
My favourite book. I recommend it to every woman I ever meet.
And, when she talks about stories like in cultures where things like vaginas would be revered as symbols of protection and healing and stuff, and so when the fishermen would go off, the women would flash their vaginas at the fishermen to wish them well and hope they'd have a bountiful
and like calm
catch
seas and
calm
stuff, wasn't it?
And there's actual phrase in the Catalonian language which sort of says, that it encapsulates all of this. And so there's cultures and the stories of women that have stopped wars by lifting up their skirts on the battlefield. So in the times it would have been more matriarchal. The whole, our bodies and everything, and you just have to look at things like certain cave paintings and art where it would be incredible images, or like the Khajuraho temples in India of sex acts and how they'd be revered and seen in culture. So it's hugely different times than we have today.
And what do you think's impacted that change?
I think religion is a massive part of it. Religion is a huge part, because sex would be something that where there would be, and I think sex in those days was also seen as more than just the act of sex. It was seen as, as the Taoists and Tantrika sit as our life force energy that we can, to be used for fertility rituals in terms of crops growing. And, there would just be this sort of, I get the sense of this flow that, sexuality would be welcome in all aspects of life. It wasn't deemed as something as to be hidden or private. Not that it was people doing it everywhere, but it's just that sexual energy, that aspect of us. Which now is so repressed that people, it's amazing. Women often will think that their sexuality only exists in relation to another person. It's not that it's theirs. We're not brought up that our bodies are something to love. Our sexual energy is something to celebrate and love as part of our life force and our radiance and our vitality. And so then when we have sexual feelings, we can feel shame if we get them in the wrong environment. And, and it's like, but actually this is going to happen. We are sexual beings from the day we're born till the day we die, and obviously there's things that are age appropriate around that. But it's like if we were welcomed with this naturalness rather than it being seen as something sinful. I mean, you just have to look at the whole religious stories. And one person said it really lovely to me. It's like when religion came in, it was like, it took the heart out of sex. It's like it's separated spirit and sex. If you look at it on a chakra level, and that ripped the heart out of it. And then from then on, sex was very base sexual chakra. It wasn't about the whole being. And spirituality was seen as something totally distinct and separate from sex. And it was all about power and control. Female sexuality throughout history, there's cultures where, and stories of it, the fear around female sexuality, that if a woman really is her sexual self, the story of Lilith and things, that she would, rip the world apart and devour it with her power. But that's, we have got an incredible power when we're connected to our bodies and our, and for me, if we were really connected to our bodies and our sexuality and our being, you wouldn't do what we're doing to the world. It's like a mirror.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of how we are with the planet and what's happening in the environment and different things, So yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading about that actually in the Yoni Shakti book. She talks about how this disconnect from our kind of womb space and our sort of Yoni chakra, I suppose, is shown within the world at large, and our disconnect from Mother Earth and all these tsunamis and earthquakes and stuff like that. It's kind of the macrocosm and the microcosm, like what's going on within your body, that disconnect. So yeah, it's all linked, isn't it?
Hugely.
And so do you find as well people coming to you who have these emotional blocks and issues around sexuality that also manifests like physically, so with menstrual problems and issues within their womb space? Yeah,
so I mean the Taoists apparently say that a woman's sexual centre is her uterus and the men's is as the prostate, and you have to look at the phenomenal amounts of problems that people have in those two areas, and they're the two areas that we have least connection with, and for women in terms of our vaginas we have even less connection than men, just by the nature that ours is more hidden and inside, and men sort of touch and deal with them every day, whereas women can go for years not even touching or looking at that part of their body literally. And so lost my thread. Well, remind me of the question.
So just how the physical
So you just, I regularly see women with pelvic pain, with fibroids, endometriosis, all these different conditions, prolapses, incontinence, all sorts. And what's heartbreaking is so much of it is preventable, and so many menstrual problems are women just disconnected from their feminine aspects and their nature, and again don't have any celebration when a woman starts bleeding. It's again seen as something to be hidden and to be repressed. Take tablets if you've got pain, and and get on with life and all of this, and the shame around it and the embarrassment. And so it can be connected to sexuality, but it also just can be connected to just what I shared about, that we don't have any acceptable celebratory culture around these aspects of womanhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I've really seen women's lives change when they engage, and also we live in such a life which is very fast paced, where we're not taught to listen to our bodies anyway. Just in general, we're shut off from our intuition, obviously, and we're often dominated by our thoughts and our thinking. So just that whole practice of coming into our bodies and listening to the signals in our bodies, because everything that's every condition is our body telling us something.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And it's just interesting you say, like, there's no celebration of our bodies, but like you kind of mentioned earlier, there's no words. Like you say, there's no words within it. So like that says in that pussy book, it's like, what even do we call our vagina or our pussies? It's like, what words do we use? So have you found that, I know you said from your perspective, when you first went to that tantra workshop, that you didn't even want to say the word vagina. So what have you found around that topic, like of bringing the words into people's lives? Like, do you find most people respond with this kind of like, oh, I can't say that word? Yeah. And like, how do you bring those words and normalize the language around sexuality and around our physical bodies?
Yeah, I think it's so loaded because one word for one could be lovely and it can be totally triggering for someone else because of their life experience usually, or the belief they have around that word. And I think just the more we say the words, that takes some of the charge out of it, so that they become, we've had moments in workshops where I just have got everyone going, pussy, cunt, and just saying it, to laugh about it. But I think it's really important just to find a word that feels good for you, because how can you ask for what you want if you can't say what it is, So it doesn't matter whether it's, so things like yoni, which is like a tantric word, some women like because it's something totally new and they don't have previous connotations with anything else. So that can work really well. And when I'm working with a group of women, I'll often get them just to everyone speak out all the words that exist for our genitals, and same for men, and so that we can just see the range of words as well. But I think it's just more about finding what feels comfortable. Yeah. And sometimes that takes a while. It's like try different words on and see which you like.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings me onto the V-Life course. So we can talk about a little bit about that and what you're doing with that.
Yeah. So so this is something I'm very excited about, because so for me, it's like my in a way, my yoni got me into this work. She was my wake up because of the relationship I had with her. And then 12 months ago, I actually had a prolapse. And I had only a minor prolapse, but it was a bit of a shock because I've been doing all this work, and I was like, oh my God, how did that happen? And that's another story. But it got me on a whole journey of really looking even more into this area, and I've been working for years helping women feel comfortable with their vaginas, learning how to touch their vaginas in a way, because how we pleasure them is very limited, how our partners touch them is very limited. So again, learning how they are, but also, when we connect to this area of our bodies, she's like a portal, she's like a power place. It's more than just the physical aspect, it's the energetic, it's the sensation, and so many women have got numbness there, they've got pain there, or they've got shame there, or all sorts of different stuff. So I wanted to create a stuff, and if you've got problems, or even if you want to learn more, there's quite sort of tantric things, and then there's quite clinical things, but there's nothing in between. So I wanted to also create something to empower women to take responsibility, not just for their pleasure there, but also for their pelvic health. Because so much of what happens out there in terms of prolapses, incontinence, is totally preventable. And I think there's so much information about what to do, but so much of it's actually rubbish. It just becomes overwhelming, and women don't do anything. Do I do Kegels? Do I do Jade egg? Do I do this, that? Oh, but I'm actually fine anyway, so I'm not going to bother. But once you have a condition, then you really wakes you up. So it's like a 4-week course, just as women, to come online together to look at all these different aspects of our bodies. So looking at how do we awaken, how do we heal, how do we feel empowered there? How do we feel pleasure there? How do we use her as like a power source, because she's got so much intelligence, literally, that she can contract to protect us from something we don't want, or she gets juicy when we've got a yes for something, and then how do we look after her for our overall health and vitality? Because our pelvic floor isn't just about holding our organs in place. It's also about, the Taoists in the perineum point, there's a huge amount of meridian lines crossed, so the health of that will help with the whole energy field in our bodies. So it's just so many wonderful things to explore with it. So I just want to bring more awareness to that and create a community of women, because when we come together as women, so much healing happens just in hearing we're not alone and hearing other people's stories.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So creating an amazing community to address this.
And so that's an online course that you run.
Yeah.
Right, amazing. I'll put all the details of the things that you've mentioned in the notes afterwards.
Fabulous.
And so I know you said then kind of there's the sort of tantric side of it, or there's the kind of medical side of it. So how does what you do differ from, if you were to go to the doctors with, I've got sexual issues, kind of how would it be addressed in that world? And then how does that compare to sort of what you do? I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but...
No, it's a great question. And, there's totally a time and a place for going to a doctor's, but the doctors look at these problems from a medical perspective, and that's a very specific lens. And so, for example, if a man is having erection problems, he'll be commonly given Viagra. But actually, it might not be a physical reason that he's having the problems. It could be emotional. It could be all sorts of things. And there's this big sort of what they call the medicalisation of sexual problems, where big pharma are really wanting to create, they call these sexual dysfunctions, which I do not like that language at all, because it's so disempowering. Yeah. And the majority, the big pharma are trying to create what they call the pink Viagra, which the last round a couple of years ago didn't get approved by the FDA in America because the results were so poor. But a pill, for example, for women's sexual desire. Now, in my experience, if I'm working with a woman with sexual desire, she's usually burnt out, exhausted, or actually she's not having great sex. But she can't say that. Yeah. There's so many reasons that I've never had to refer anyone to a doctor. Yeah. It's always got sorted out through looking at it more. So I would say the difference is I look at things totally holistically. I'm looking at it on a mind, body, soul level. And, some doctors do try and do that, but they don't have the training or the time to do that, because with sexual problems, it often does need a lot of investigation and digging into what's impacting it, because it's never usually one thing. It's usually a few things.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just kind of jumping back to, you kind of briefly mentioned it, but I just wanted to sort of touch on the Jade egg practices. Yeah. So if you kind of, for people who wouldn't know what that is, if you kind of explain a little bit about that, because I know you do workshops around that as well, don't you? Yeah.
So the jade egg is an egg made out of the jade stone, but you can get them made out of things like rose quartz and obsidian and things as well, and it's put inside the vagina, and then you do a series of exercises to strengthen the muscles inside. And what I love about the practices is there's the jade egg, but it's also the practices that prepare the body. So, for example, breast massage I just think if it's one practice women do, it's breast massage. It's just the most amazing practice. It's a beautiful self-love practice, and it can heal if women have no sensation there, or if they don't, I've had so many women who don't like the look of their breasts, but when they do breast massage, they go, oh God, but they feel quite good actually, and it totally can transform that. Yeah. But also it can help balance the hormonal system, because the glands and the endocrine glands are all linked up with the nipples and the clitoris. So by massaging this area, it can help balance menstrual problems. It can help women with navigate menopause, and also it can help activate our sexual energy. And so I think for so many women, we think that our sexual energy should just happen and we should just feel desire, and if we don't, there's something up with us. And actually it's not the case, especially in busy lives. We need to have it activated for us then to feel the desire. There's nothing wrong with you if you don't feel sexual desire often. It's just you just need a different way of starting the engine.
Right, yeah.
And so breast massage can really help with that. So there's lots of beautiful practices that just help women to connect with their body in a really beautiful way. And the jade egg, because the original Kegel exercises were with a device inside, because it was the device that was giving, like you go weight training. Right. If you go weight training, you need weights to create the resistance, and the device created the resistance. And what it does is it not just exercises the pelvic floor, but it also exercises the vaginal canal, and it just keeps that whole area sort of supple and healthy. And because you're doing the practices, it helps with blood flow, circulation. So, I've seen women who've maybe lost some of their lubrication after menopause, helps activate that again, helps activate sensation in the vaginal canal. So many different wonderful benefits from it.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, kind of, how would you suggest for someone to kind of get started on this journey, like to what we were talking about earlier, kind of befriend their sexuality?
Yeah.
So it would be, because I think as well, it's like, so for people, I know in terms of yoga, so I'm a yoga teacher, so some people go, oh, I can't go to a yoga class because I'm not flexible enough. And I think that there's a certain type of person who'll go, oh yeah, but I'll just go, and they'll go to the studio. But for every one person who'll come to the studio, there's probably 10 at home who think, oh, I still can't go, I'm not confident enough. And I would imagine it's probably the same for you, that there's so many people who will come to you as a client, but for every one of them, there's probably someone who isn't even confident enough to contact you to tell you what's going on with them. So to people like that who are at home and feeling like, I'm not ready to face this stuff with somebody else, how would you kind of speak to those people?
Yeah, and I would say probably more than one for everyone.
Well, yeah.
Unfortunately. So first of all, somebody might not be ready, and that's 100% okay, because I think we push ourselves too much, and actually there's sometimes a right timing to things. So for some people, even just having thoughts about this might be massive, because they've maybe pushed it to the back of their minds. They don't want to think about it for all sorts of different reasons. And often what I find is the fear of getting help with this area of their lives, if they're having problems, is huge. And actually everybody that I've worked with has found that once they've started talking about it and they were able to just share all the contents that were in their mind that they've been rattling around with for years, just the relief. And just, so many people, I've had people cry when I've told, they've asked me, is what I've shared normal? And when I've told them, I've had grown men cry in my room, in my office. So I just to say this, people have the fear usually is massively above and beyond what the reality is. And also, there's that phrase, the path to tread is where the fear is, and through the door of fear is the treasure that you seek. The fear is like showing us as something we really need to look at. But it might be that you have a friend that you feel you could talk to about it, or it might be just pick up a book or find a blog or something online that feels, there's so many great stuff, there is some great stuff out there nowadays that just wasn't around 15 years ago. Listen to some podcasts, hear other people speak about it. So there's all that, that sort of stuff that you can do. There might be like workshops in your local area or online courses. There's lots more people doing this sort of thing. And I think, I was saying to you before, often we have a vision for every area of our life, like health and relationships and work. But when it comes to sex, we don't. And I think it's really great to look at, well, who am I as a sexual being? How did I get here? What beliefs and things am I carrying that are positive, and what's actually not good for me anymore? What's not serving me, what's holding me back? And just to know that, so many people have challenges in this area of our lives because we just don't have great conversations, and it's not an open area. So once you start to take the lid off it and look at it and go, oh my God, no wonder I'm experiencing this. You can start, I say to people, one of the things I do is help them to love their sexual selves, because we bury it, we don't like it, we feel guilt, we feel shame, all sorts of different things. But if we can find that love for this part of ourselves and that compassion and see that we're struggling, not because there's anything wrong with us, there isn't, anything wrong with you. To the people out there that are listening to this, I promise you, absolutely promise you, I say there's nothing to fix, it's about flourishing, and it's about finding what lights you up, not trying to fit into a box of how you think you should be as a sexual being. Our sexuality is so, how it might look is as varied as all our faces are different. It's finding what's true for you sexually and following that, I would say, as well.
And like you were saying earlier about the fact that most people are just, well, not most people, but a lot of people just aren't having great sex, like you were saying before. So that's something just that, but it is possible for people, because I think a lot of people just, okay, that's just the way it is.
Totally. And because, for example, if I bring this up with my partner, well, everything else is great, and and also they may have brought it up with their partner and they've been that's met their partners felt criticised because we often don't have we often know what we don't want, but we don't know what we do want when it comes to sex. And and I totally believe that people can have long-term great sex, but it needs working at. It's not just going to happen. And there's going to be times when it ebbs and flows and dips and rises, and that can be navigated when it's done consciously. But I think so many people are out there having really mediocre sex, but don't know how to change it for all sorts of different reasons. So that might be another reason someone might come forward. But there's some great books out there as great places to start as well. So yeah,
I can put all that in the notes. And so just wanted to also touch on, because I know I asked this question before we went live, and so we talked about it, but about the sexological bodywork that you do. So if you just wanted to kind of explain what that is and how you work with people in that capacity.
Yeah, so sexological bodywork is just, it's a modality for working with people, which is amazing. And it's relatively new because, and what's amazing is, because it brings the body into the sessions, it's like, if I'm going to learn to play the piano, I would not sit with a teacher and take notes and then try and go home and play the piano. I play the piano with them.
Yeah.
And it's the same when it comes to the body. And it's a training that happens all around the world. It's in the UK as well. Now I'm joining the teaching team in September, so I really recommend checking it out. And it's great, for people who are doing, I know there's been people come from all sorts of disciplines to do the training. It's not just people working in the field of sexuality. It might be people wanting to understand more about that aspect or wanting to move into that as a career. And it's just, when it comes to the body, how our behaviours are in the body will deeply affect our sexual experience. And, particularly if you've had things like trauma, and it doesn't have to be sexual trauma. You might be brought up in a violent household or had a parent that just ignored you, and all these different traumas that are affectors can just be create as many issues in our sex lives for sure. And so it covers such a range of things, from looking at things like trauma through to how do we navigate the field of intimacy in our lives, because it's massive. How do we get to know about our bodies and our pleasure? And it can look like many things, from helping somebody to look at how their breathing is, and how that might be affecting their intimacy, because lots of people hold their breath or shallow breathe, which can create tension, and if somebody's got sexual problems, that will just exacerbate it. It can be sitting down with somebody who, for example, I've worked with women who, no matter how many pictures of women's vulvas I show them, they still believe that they're deformed and there's something wrong with them. So it might be sitting down with somebody and getting a mirror out and helping a woman look for the first time, because she's really scared of looking on her own and just holding her hand while she looks and just seeing that everything's totally fine.
Do you find that a lot with women, like the kind of physical issues within their bodies?
In terms of
the body, like the body image, kind of body dysmorphia, but with like things like that,
yeah. So with breasts and genitals, and the other area that I think women find the hardest of all is their bellies.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if we were to do a survey on it, I think that's probably the biggest area of all. But definitely, especially, and then their vulvas and their vaginas, because we've got so many negative messaging around it, the perfect porn pussy and all this sort of stuff.
That's the thing, you don't see other women's vaginas, so of course you're not going to know what's normal and what's not. Oh, well, it's all normal.
Exactly. It's all natural. It's all normal. But and there's a phrase. It's like our genital sense of self. If we don't feel natural and normal there, then it affects everything.
Right. Okay.
We think there's something off with us in a whole. It really affects us at such a core level.
Yeah.
So sexological bodywork is helping people, and it sometimes involves them, practicing how they are in their arousal and different things. So, I'd love to see this taken out on such a wider level, because sometimes for many people, just sitting and talking about it is never going to get to the crux of their sexual problems. It's just, or even their having more sexual pleasure. It's like a school of sexuality, if you like, that you can go and learn how your bodies work, and how, what turns you on, what lights you up, how to speak about it. how to communicate it in a way that's empowering. And so many people, when they speak about sexual stuff, can end up feeling triggered or criticized. So how do we speak about it in a way that's really healthy and creates a great sexual experience? That just is something I do so much with my clients, and that alone can be really transformative. But we can post a link to the Sexological Bodywork course.
Definitely. I'll do that. And then in terms of the direction that you're going in and the things that you're doing, I know obviously you're doing the online course and stuff, but what else have you got planned for the future?
Wow, lots. There's so much. And, I'm just so passionate about creating spaces for people to just talk naturally and openly about this and to share information that can make a difference. Because someone might listen to this and just hearing this will be a snippet of something that will help them. So I've got all sorts of plans. I do retreats for women. I want to do more of those, because getting people away for the weekend and the week to dive deep into some of this is really, really powerful. I do another online course called the Ignite the Erotic, which is like a 6-week course, and it's all the foundations of creating a strong erotic life. So looking at self-love, because again, if our mind's been really critical, doesn't matter what about, or we're not being, we're not liking ourselves for all sorts of different reasons. So we look at self-love, we look at some of the myths and the messages we get as women and all this sort of stuff, which is wonderful. So I'm loving the online courses and just creating an amazing community of women, because there's so much magic happens when women come together. And I'm October running my first day for couples with my dear friend and colleague Sue Newsom, and really looking forward to that, because couples, again, I think that one of the big myths is sex should just happen naturally, and if it doesn't, there's something up with us, but actually there's so much to learn for couples in terms of creating a culture of practice and communication and all that sort of stuff as well. And then more Jade egg workshops. That's an area that I just so passionate about, is helping people find practices. And I think that's so key with this, is like we need practices to help us feel good about ourselves. This goes much beyond sex and sexuality. It's about pleasure in our lives and allowing ourselves pleasure, allowing ourselves to enjoy life. So loads of things.
Definitely. And would you recommend people, like, in the practice to dedicate time to pleasure, like every day, have that regular practice? I suppose you can find pleasure in all throughout your day, but like the actual dedicated time and practice, would you say try and make it like your daily practice?
I'm a great believer in something I call micro practice. Okay, so that, because if people feel they've got to add another practice to their already pressured lives, they just can switch off. So I just say, like, it's more about starting with doing what you're doing already, but just do it a bit differently. So when you're in the shower, enjoy washing your body and take a couple of minutes, rather than thinking about what's happening, in the day ahead. Enjoy eating food and have that as a practice of pleasure, because we rush that. If you can, it might be at work that you go and sit outside and enjoy the sunshine, or you have a bath instead of watching a bit of telly. It's just doing little bits, and I think it's like little morsels of pleasure that feed our soul, that help us to create time for more. But I'd say ultimately with any of the practices, it's doing what lights you up. If it doesn't light you up, forget it. I've seen people go to yoga because they feel they should do it, but it's like actually it's not for them. And it's like, I loved what you were saying before about helping people just to feel the practices to feel good. And if you can't feel good about what you're doing, then it's the wrong practice.
It's the wrong thing. Exactly.
So it's about finding what helps you to feel good. And like and again in yoga, we can be I've noticed this myself, but also with others. That practice of feeling good, I think that's just such a beautiful message for people to have in their own yoga practice.
And I guess that is just a mindfulness practice, like you were saying 100%. Before, just being present with, what am I doing, and how does this feel good, and how can I make it feel good, and then welcoming that pleasure into your life.
And can I just add one thing to that as well? Because what I run these erotic yoga classes, which is practices that help us connect to our sensual and sexual selves. And I think it's really great to create time for that, because I think we have to be aroused or feel desire to do anything. But actually, if we do that in modern life, we might be waiting for a long time. And when people create time, I've had so many people come back to me and go, I wasn't aroused, it wasn't feeling pleasurable, but I got into it and it was amazing, you know? So creating time for practice to get to know your sexual self, whether that's reading a book, watching a podcast, whether it's doing some breast massage, whether it's creating time to learn about your body with self-pleasure, whether it's you and your partner getting together and creating time to explore, you know, amazing practices like genital massage and erotic massage that are not goal focused, they're just about exploring pleasure. So I think having these little practices is super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. And just to finish off, if people want to get in touch with you or contact you or anything, could you just say your details?
Yeah. So I am, my email address, my website is sarahrosebright.com. And you can email me at sarah@sarahrosebright.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram as Sarah Rose Bright. I'm starting to post little videos and content on there, and on YouTube. I just started a YouTube channel, so that's Sarah Rose Bright too. And on Facebook, I've got a page, so come find me on all those places.
I can post all that as well. And then I think the last kind of thing that I was going to ask about is the sort of key take-home points for people to start their practice today, which I think we've kind of just covered, but maybe if you could just kind of summarise just a couple of points that people can just take away and do right now as they switch this podcast off. Like, go away and do it right now.
Well, beautiful. Well, you know, for women, I'd say just breast massage. You know, literally, it's, you know, and you can do it with clothes on, you can do it with clothes off, you can do it with oil, and it's so good for our breast health and everything as well. So absolutely, I'd say breast massage. But also, you know, what would it, just to ask yourself, what would I love to do right now? I'll give myself 20 minutes, you know. Would it, you know, and it might actually be go curl up and have a nap, you know. It's because we sometimes, you know, I think we push ourselves so much. One of the things that I do with all my clients is helping find what helps you to really relax and helps you to really switch off and to really have nourishing rest time, because that's another way of filling the tank. It's not just about pleasure, because people can go and do pleasure and it might be extreme sports and all sorts of things, which is amazing, but it's also about having nourishing rest time, and whether that's finding a mindfulness app to listen to, you know, going for a walk, whatever it is. I think those practices are so important, and just switching off from technology, you know, having time away from that.
That's definitely a big one as well. Okay, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was just so inspiring, and I feel like I've got so much from it myself, so I'm sure that everybody who's listening has got so much as well. And as I said at the beginning, anyone who I've spoken to about this were like, oh, I definitely want to listen to that. I want to have a session with her, like, as soon as I mention it, as we've spoke about. It's such a big topic, and I think it's just so important, and it's amazing the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you about it all.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
So there you go. That was my conversation with Sarah Rose Bright. I hope that you took a lot away from this podcast. I know I did. After speaking to Sarah, it just made me think about my own life and how important it is to cultivate those connections with yourself and prioritize self-love and pleasure in whatever form that comes in your life. And just allow the space for that, you know, not feel embarrassed and not feel like we've not got permission to do that, and try not to be too busy to give yourself time, even if it is just taking a bath or going for a walk. Like Sarah said, it's just so important to have that time for yourself. And if there were things in this episode that resonated with you, or something that you feel you wanted to open up the conversation about, then feel free to get in touch. I'll put Sarah's details below so you can get in touch with her. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this field, but if you do want to reach out to me, then I'm more than happy to chat about it, because sometimes that's the best thing, just to kind of open up that conversation. So that's what this podcast is all about, sort of making those connections. So feel free to get in touch. My Instagram is This Is Womanhood, and I'm also on Facebook and all of that. I'll put the details below. So yeah, do get in touch, and if you enjoyed the podcast, then subscribe and share it, because that really does help as I'm trying to build it. So thank you all for listening, and I will see you on the next one.